Hey everyone, Mr. Aarons. Today we are going to be doing our last unit in Chapter 3. That's Chapter 3.6. And we're going to be doing some metric systems. So today we're going to be using the metric system. I have attached something that looks like this for those of you that are distance learners. If not, I should have given you one in advance. Just a little cheat sheet for our metric system. We'll be using that a little bit in today's lesson. So I recommend either copying that down in your notes, or if you have a way to print that off, or even if you just want to use a picture of it, whatever works for me, works for you. So a lot of today is figuring out our way around the metric system, looking at some different things, and then eventually we'll get to converting. For the most part, we're just going to try to familiarize ourselves with the metric system. So right away, I'm going to look at this right here. This is our metric system. These are the basics here, our key metric units. So we have one category that talks about length, one that talks about capacity, and one that talks about mass. Those are going to be our three big ones that we're going to talk about. And within those, they've kind of laid out some key units. So right here in our length, we have our millimeters, centimeters, meters, and kilometers. I decided those are the four that we need to know the most. Capacity, we have milliliters and liters. And mass, we have milligram, gram, kilogram. There's a lot more than that. I have them all listed here. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Not super important for you to know that. These are the ones that we want to know. And as you can see, they have a reference example for about how much they weigh next to each one. So we have or length or how much they hold. So for example, a millimeter, they say, is about the thickness of a dime. So that's going to help us when we're thinking about what metric unit we want to use. So if we look at centimeter, we have the width of a thumbnail. So I'm thinking the width of a thumbnail, I actually have one right here. There's my thumbnail. So if I think the width of a thumbnail is probably about a centimeter. So I can imagine that being my centimeter. And it says a millimeter is about the thickness of a dime. So that's going to be I'm just going to use this. A little bit smaller than that even. So just a quick reference. And then it tells us a meter is about the distance from the doorknob to the floor. So if we're thinking on a door. So it's quite a bit bigger. Then we got that kilometer, which is a little over half of a mile. So that's going to be a lot bigger. Then within capacity, we got a milliliter, which is about 5 drops of water, a liter, which is a little bit more than a quart of milk, so a quarter gallon, pretty close to that. And then for mass, we have a milligram, which is about the mass of a speck of sawdust, so super small. A gram, about the mass of paperclip, that's how much that's going to weigh, and a kilogram, about 1/2 the mass of this math book. So I know you don't have the math book, but I know you've seen one before. I actually got it sitting over here. Just a quick textbook, pretty regular textbook. Imagine textbooks that you've seen, about half the mass of that. That's going to be our kilogram. All right, so our first thing in our lesson here is choosing a unit. When we're choosing a unit, we have to take into consideration what's going to be the most effective. We don't want to sit there and have to count a zillion of something. We also don't want to sit there and say, oh, it's give or take 1 meter. I'm not going to be able to measure my finger in meters. If the meter is the distance from the floor to the doorknob, I'm not going to be able to measure my finger using that. So our first one is the height of a classroom chalkboard. So we're thinking height. We pull up our little diagram here. Height of a classroom chalkboard. We're thinking length. I'm not weighing it. I'm not seeing how much it holds. I'm thinking how big it is, how tall it is. So I can either use millimeters, which are thickness of dime, the width of a thumbnail, which is our centimeter, or distance to about the distance from the doorknob to the floor, or a little more than 1/2 mile. I know it's not going to be a half mile. I think milliliters is going to be a little ridiculous. That's going to be way too small for talk about the distance or the height of a classroom chalkboard or a whiteboard. So I'm thinking my best option here is going to be meters. I'm going to write meters in here. That's going to give us a nice estimation when we're looking at our chalkboard, our whiteboard. Our meters is a pretty good size for that. Perfect. B, mass of a backpack filled with math textbooks. So we're looking at mass. We have three options here. We've got milligrams, which is about the mass of a speck of sawdust. That's going to be so many. That's going to be ridiculous to try to measure our backpack full of textbooks. A gram, about the mass of paper clips. That's going to be, once again, a lot of paper clips. Not super ideal. And then our last one is kilograms. About 1/2 the mass of a math textbook. I think that would be a great way to measure the mass of a backpack filled with math textbooks. So I'm going to write kilograms in there. And then our last one is capacity of a bird bath. When we're thinking capacity, we're thinking how much can it hold. So our capacity, we could either count in about 5 drops of water or about 1/4 of a gallon of milk. So we have the difference between like a regular water bottle size or 5 drops of water. When I'm thinking a bird bath, I'm thinking it's going to be a lot of drops of water. So instead of doing a bunch of drops of water, I'm going to count it in something a little bit more like a water bottle size. So I'm going to use liters there. So basically, you have to take a few things into consideration when you're doing this. Decide what would be best for whatever you're measuring. There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but there's going to be some that are going to be better. All right, so now we're going to estimate with the metric units. We're doing a similar thing here. They're just going to give us 2 different units to use, and we decide which one is better. So we're thinking capacity of a juice box. We can either measure in milliliters or liters. Remember, our milliliter is about 5 drops of water. Our liter is a little bit more than a quart of milk. I know that a juice box is much smaller than a quart of milk. So 200 liters would be an insane amount for a juice box. 200 milliliters would be 5 drops of water 200 times. I think that's a little bit more realistic for our juice box. B, length of a pencil. Either 15 centimeters or 15 meters. I look at my lengths. My meter says about the distance from the doorknob to the floor. My centimeter says about the width of a thumbnail. I'm thinking a pencil here. I got my pencil. Is this going to be even 1 meter? No, this isn't going to be a meter. This isn't going to be the distance from the doorknob to the floor. So it can't be 15 meters, but it could be 15 centimeters, 15 width of a thumbnail. So that's what I'm going to do for that. And C, mass of a small tube of toothpaste. I either got 100 grams or 100 kilograms. Let's look at the difference. 100 grams would be 100 paper clips. Kilograms would be 100 half math books. That's going to be way too heavy. That would be too heavy for me to even carry. I can't hold that much toothpaste. It's got to be 100 grams, 100 paper clips. So they were just kind of comparing our units again, thinking about what would be best for each. Putting a little time and thought into those will make those a lot easier. All right, on to converting on the back side. This part where it gets a little bit trickier. So when we are converting, we have a few steps here. I kind of listed them out for you. My step 1 is to find the 2 units that you are converting from. Step 2, if you are going from larger to smaller, then you multiply by 10 for each step between the two. That'll make sense in a second. If you are going from smaller to larger, then you divide by 10s for each step in between. So here, this is where this chart's going to come in handy. Right here, I have it all listed out. There's another chart on the bottom to help you out. So it shows you that if we are going from kilograms or kilometers to meters, we do times 10, times 10, times 10. And vice versa. If we are going from meters to kilometers, we do divide by 10, divide by 10, divide by 10. So I'll put that right above. Actually, we'll do that down below here. Divide by 10, divide by 10, divide by 10. So basically what we have to do is we have to count up the amount of steps between where we're trying to convert to and multiply that by 10 or divide that by 10 appropriately. So, for example, on my first one here, they want me to go from 4.5 liters to milliliters. So I'm looking up here, look at my chart. I know that liters is going to be capacity, so I'm looking for my capacity line right here. And we're going from milliliters to liters, or liters to milliliters. So I see liters right here. I see milliliters right here. So I have 4.35 liters. I'm going to multiply that because we're going from larger to smaller. I look at my rules here. If you're going from larger to smaller, multiply by 10 for each step. So we got one step. So that's times 10, times 10, times 10, times 10, times 10, times 10, 3 times. I know that's going to be the same as times 10 is 100, times 10 is 1,000. So I'm going to do liters times 1,000. So that would get us to 4,350 milliliters. I counted the amount of steps between the two units and multiplied this time. If I was going from smaller to larger, I would divide. Our next one, we have 914 centimeters equals how many meters? Okay, I'm going to find my two units on here. I got centimeters right here. I got meters right here. We're going from centimeters to meters. So I'm going to be moving this way. If I'm going from smaller to larger, I'm going to be dividing. So I divide by 10. And then I divide by 10 again. So I'm going to be dividing by 100. So divide by 100, and that's going to move my decimal 2 spots. Divide by 10, divide by 100. 9.14 meters. On this last one, I moved my decimal 0.3 spots. That's how I got to 4,350. This time I'm divided by 100. All right, our last one, we got grams to kilograms. So I'm going to find my chart here. We're going from grams to kilograms. Look at that. We're getting from smaller to bigger. So I see divide by 10. Divide by 10. I should have one more in here. Divide by 10. Or I look down here, I see grams to kilograms is divide by 100. So I'm going to divide by, oh, excuse me, I said 100. If we look on our chart, going from grams to kilograms, divide by 1,000. Not 100, excuse me. Because there's 3 steps in between, so that means there's going to be 3 zeros. So I'm going to move that decimal spot 3 times to go from kilograms, 250 kilograms, 2 grams. Oh, I messed up here. Did you guys notice my mistake while I was going through there? So they flip-flopped this on me. So I'm trying to figure out how many grams. They already gave me kilograms. They switched the order. That messed me up. So I'm actually going from larger to smaller. So I'm actually switching this order. I'm actually going this way. So if I'm going from larger to smaller, I'm going to be multiplying. So I'm going to change this divide by 1,000 to multiply by my 1,000. Maybe you saw my mistake before I did. If so, that's awesome. But I just realized now I'm trying to figure out grams, not kilograms. They gave me kilograms. I'm going from 250 kilograms to grams. So I'm going from larger to smaller. I'm going to multiply by 1,000. That's going to get me moving 3 times. Add 3 zeros on here. 1, 2, 3. So that would be 250,000 grams is 250 kilograms. Add those 3 zeros for timesing it by 1,000. Perfect. All right, last one. Machu Picchu is 2,300 meters above sea level. How many kilometers is Machu Picchu's altitude? So we're going from meters to kilometers. I'm going to look that up. I like that I did this time. I probably should have done it from the last. I probably should on this one have written kilograms to grams. Helps me think about what I'm converting from. So I'm looking here. I got meters, and I'm going to kilometers. So let's see here. We are going to be moving from smaller to larger. That means we're dividing to get to kilometers. We need to divide. I look on my chart here. I'm going from meter, kilometer, kilometer, excuse me. Then divide by 1,000. Divide by 1,000. equals, that means I'm going to move my decimal place here once, twice, 3 times, 2.3 kilometers would be your final answer. So figure out which units you're transferring from. Write them down. Look on your cheat sheet, on your chart. Figure out how many times you need to divide or multiply. Pay attention to those key rules. If you're going from larger to smaller, multiply by 10 for each step. If you're going from smaller to larger, divide by 10 for each step. Use this chart. Use this the whole lesson. Yeah, that's the metric system. Good luck today.